Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled People Story. I've lived in my house for over 15 years now. It's nothing too fancy, just a modest two-bedroom place in the suburbs. But it's my little slice of paradise. The neighborhood is nice and quiet, perfect for raising my two daughters. About a year ago, this new family moved in across the street. Kevin, Karen, and their young son. They seemed friendly enough at first. I went over and introduced myself, even baked them some cookies to welcome them to the neighborhood. But it wasn't long before Karen started showing her true colors. She was one of those stereotypical Karens, entitled demanding, thought the world revolved around her. She was constantly complaining about the most minor things, kids playing too loudly, dogs barking, even the mail truck being too noisy when it drove by. Honestly, I don't know why she moved into a suburban neighborhood in the first place. Anyway, a few months ago, I decided to take my daughters on a vacation to visit some relatives out of state. I made sure to let a few of my neighbors know I'd be gone for 2 weeks and asked them to keep an eye on the house for me. Or so I thought. We were about halfway through our trip when I got a frantic call from my next-door neighbor, Janet. "Your house is being shown," she told me. "There's a real estate agent giving a tour to some potential buyers." I was completely blindsided. "What?" I said. "I never listed my house for sale." Janet said Karen was the one who had listed it. She'd forged some documents and was passing herself off as the homeowner. I was absolutely livid. How dare this woman try to sell my house right out from under me? I told Janet to call the police immediately. I would have done it myself, but I was already driving to the airport to catch the next flight home. As soon as I landed, I raced to my house. Sure enough, there was a sold sign out front with the name of a realty company I'd never even heard of. Inside, strangers were wandering through my home, admiring the kitchen, peering into bedrooms. At made my skin crawl. Just then, Karen came waltzing up the driveway, waving a folder of papers. "Oh, good, you're back," she said smugly. "Now we can finalize the sale." "Sale? What sale?" I said. "This is my house, not yours." "Not anymore," she said, shoving the papers at me. "I own it now. I even have a bill of sale you signed." I grabbed the document and realized the signature was a complete fake. This woman had lost her mind. "I never signed anything!" I yelled. "You forged my signature to steal my home." "No need to get upset," Karen said calmly. "It's done fair and square. Let's talk to the buyers inside and explain the situation." Like hell I would. I may not be a confrontational person, but this was going too far. I stormed inside and announced loudly, "There's been a huge mistake. This house is not for sale." Turning to the startled buyers, I added, "I'm so sorry you were dragged here under false pretenses." The real estate agent looked bewildered. "What do you mean? I have the paperwork!" Karen came rushing in behind me, shouting, "Don't listen to her. She's just the previous owner. I'm the one selling it." The poor agent didn't know what to think. Meanwhile, the buyers were whispering to each other nervously. Sensing things were about to unravel, Karen made a last-ditch effort to regain control. "Can we see the purchase agreement?" she asked the agent. "I have it right here in my folder." "Enough!" I snapped. I explained to the agent that I was the true homeowner and Karen was trying to illegally sell my property without my knowledge or consent. The agent's face paled. She turned to Karen and demanded, "What's the meaning of this? Are you even authorized to list and sell this residence?" Karen stammered and stuttered, unable to produce any evidence that she actually owned my house. The agent apologized profusely, explaining she'd been provided fraudulent forms. She would notify her broker immediately so they could take legal action. Karen could only stand there gaping in shock as her scheme unraveled. At that point, the police arrived. After I showed them proof of ownership, they arrested Karen for real estate fraud. As she was led away in handcuffs, she was still spouting some nonsense about having rights to sell the place. Delusional until the bitter end. The buyers were pretty shaken up, understandably. I thanked them for their patience and apologized again for the terrible misunderstanding. I also had a long talk with the real estate agent about how they verify legal documents before listing properties for sale. She agreed their policies needed to be revised. It was certainly an eventful return from vacation. I still can't believe the audacity of that woman trying to literally steal my house. She clearly has some serious mental issues. I just hope she gets the help she needs and stays far away from me and my home. This experience taught me that you really can't be too careful, even in a safe neighborhood like ours. But in the end, the truth came out, and the justice system dealt fairly with Karen and her crazy behavior. She may have caused me some stress over my beloved house, but now I can relax knowing she won't be bothering me again. The next one is a pro-revenge story. This opinion is terrible, my boss told me. He'd been a lawyer for 3 years, and the firm assigned me to him for training, to show me, a junior counsel, how to be a litigator. I disliked my boss for a number of reasons. He knew no law, and he expressed himself poorly in writing. For a litigator, that's like strikes 1 and 2 right there, and strike 3 was this: he had no courage. He was actually scared of going to court. I noticed this when he took me to assignment court one day, and when it was his turn to speak, his hands were shaking. He was scared in assignment court, of all places, where all you do is set a trial date. "What's wrong with what I wrote?" I said. "Not what I asked for," he said, turning away. But when I checked the memo he'd emailed me 2 weeks earlier, I saw that the opinion I wrote was exactly what he had asked for. I knew what was up. He was going to delete my dockets for writing the memo, and then claim he did it himself, thus leaving me quite a bit short of my docketing quota for the month. I knew that he would do this to me because he'd done it before. I knew that my memo would wind up on a partner's desk without my name on it. I knew that for a fact because the firm I worked at was one of the first in the city to have a really good internal network. We were using email for internal communications before the internet became a thing. So the firm was way ahead in terms of technology, but not in terms of security. And not long after I joined the firm, I learned how to access the firm's hard drive and find interesting things, like evidence that my boss was plagiarizing my work. My boss was the very model of the young downtown lawyer. His perfect shoes always gleamed. He wore bespoke suits because he came from money. Everyone just took it for granted that he was on the partner track. I, on the other hand, was well on my way to nowhere special, so maybe he thought it was okay to mess with me. If so, that was a big mistake on his part. I didn't like having my billable hours messed with. I seriously resented it because I was already being targeted as one of the juniors who doesn't docket as much as he should, and I was getting pushback from the partner who headed our team. I told the partner what was going on, but he didn't care. It was like being back in middle school and showing up in the office with bruises on my face, and the principal saying, "Boys will be boys," and sending me on my way. "You'll just have to work harder, or smarter," the partner said, when I reported the latest nonsense my boss did to me. I couldn't work harder. I was working the usual 6 days a week that lawyers downtown are forced to do. But I could work smarter. That night I thought up a plan. Christmas was coming, and I thought I'd give my boss a little present. It landed on his desk on December 24th, in the form of a memo purporting to be from the partner that my boss reported to. The partner was an old guy, not really on board with emails and computers, so he did everything old school, on paper. When my boss came in on December 24th and saw a memo on his desk from the partner with a legal research assignment, that wasn't unusual. The memo was drafted in the usual form that the partner used because, of course, I had taken great pains to make sure that it looked authentic. My boss walked over to the small cubicles where the juniors worked and gave me the same memo, except his secretary had retyped it, so now the assignment was from him to me, instead of from the partner to my boss. The assignment was difficult, requiring me to do a deep dive into admiralty law, its relationship to the common law, combined with a constitutional division of powers question. "But this is a huge assignment," I whined, "and I'm going to be away. Can't you get someone else to do it? Is it really urgent?" The memo I'd forged to my boss stressed how utterly urgent the situation was, but there was no way my boss could double-check with the partner because the partner left the day before on vacation. That's why I'd waited until December 24th. "No can do," my boss said. "This is a big deal. Just let HR know. Maybe they'll give you time and a half or something." He turned his back and walked away, thinking he had ruined my holidays. But he was mistaken. You see, I'd written a paper for a third-year course that was basically the same thing as the research assignment in the memo. So the only work I had to do was to find the old floppy disk with the draft on it, fiddle with it a bit, and voila, a very detailed and very long memo on an obscure point of admiralty law, with references dating back to Lord Coke's day. So I put the memo together and took my holidays as planned. I wasn't traveling anywhere because I had no money, but I saw my family and stayed in town. I made a point of dropping by the office during the holidays, sending an email or two, establishing that I was around, and docketing all my time for the huge amount of research I was allegedly doing. So the holidays ended, and I'm sitting in my tiny cubicle with a huge stack of work to do, and my boss comes up to me in one of his bespoke suits with a gold tie pin and cufflinks to match. He was wearing a gold watch, too. He was dressed up even for him, trying to make an impression of some kind. "Where's that memo? You were supposed to have it on my desk when I got back. I'm going into a meeting at noon." "Just finished it this morning," I said, handing him the lengthy memo that was still warm from the printer. My boss took the memo in his hands, felt its weight, and smiled. Then he turned and walked away without a word. Just before lunch, I heard a commotion down the hall. It was a pretty loud commotion as such things go, a loud damn, and then a door was flung open. It was the partner, and he was shouting for my boss to get his rear into his office now, right now. As in, immediately. I had the pleasure of watching my boss scramble down the hall. "Just what the heck is this?" the partner said, standing in the doorway to his office and holding my handiwork at arm's length with his thumb and index finger, as if he were afraid that handling it would soil him. My boss mumbled something, and then the partner ushered him inside. I heard more shouting, then the sound of muffled excuses, and then more shouting from the partner. Then the door flung open again. "Khalid in the 90S, get your rear in here too," the partner said, and I hurriedly joined them. "Did you write this memo?" the partner said. I took it from him and looked it over. "I wrote it. The cover page has been changed to remove my name, but other than that, it's mine. I spent all Christmas on it. Is there something wrong with it?" The partner exploded. "Is there something wrong with it? Something wrong? I'll tell you what's wrong with it. It's utterly useless. Completely useless." I explained that I'd followed my boss's instructions to the letter, and that I'd docketed more than 100 hours on it. At this, the partner really lost his temper and told me to go back to my desk and fetch him the memo from my boss. I brought it to him, and when he read it, his face turned red. He told me I could leave, and I hurriedly left the room. From my small cubicle, I wasn't close enough to hear the full chewing out my boss got, but I heard the details through the grapevine over the next few days about how the partners were seriously annoyed that my boss had wasted over 100 hours of a junior's time on a useless task that was obviously a prank. And how had my boss not realized that he was being pranked? Was he an idiot? I wasn't blamed at all, of course. I had been working under my boss's close supervision. My boss didn't get fired, but there were some good outcomes for me. For one thing, the partner told me to send him a copy of any memos I wrote for my boss, and that ended my boss taking credit for my work. My boss also stopped deleting my dockets for my research. Plus, I got a belated Christmas bonus for having to give up my alleged vacation to write the stupid memo. I really hated working in that place, but whenever times were tough, I'd think back to the case of the forged memo, and that always brought a smile to my face. The next one is a petty revenge story. My father had been a mistreating deadbeat for my whole life until he found a good-paying job at some point when I was in uni. He decided to help me out with everything. He told my mom he'd give her $1,000, which is a huge amount in our currency, to put into my uni and other things I would need, but not tell me about it because he was unsure if someone who had only recently become a legal adult could spend this amount in a smart way. Then he died 3 days before meeting with my mom. I was heartbroken because no matter how bad he was still my dad. The funeral passed, and I told my mom, "Don't you find it weird that they haven't said a single thing about the money?" She told me to give them time because this happened out of the blue, and they were probably too shocked to get through everything. A month passed, and my grandparents called my mom. They said they needed to talk about this money arrangement they had with my father. My mom got excited because we had just started experiencing some monetary issues, and that amount of money would be a huge relief. Then they offered us a deal. Because my father lived with his parents, half of their apartment belonged to me. If I agreed to discard that heritage through a notary, then I would receive the money. Honestly, alarm bells were ringing all over because it was money my father specifically set aside for me. There wasn't any deal between him and my mother. He just wanted to do something for me once in a blue moon. But my mom and I are really trusting people. If someone says we will do this, we believe those people because we don't lie. So why would they? Also, I didn't really want this part of the apartment because it would never be fully mine, as my grandparents don't really like me and also have another son and granddaughter. So we agreed to the deal. Then I signed the documents and waited 6 months while my grandparents led us on, until finally, they got fed up with my mother asking about their part of the deal and told her straight up that they would not be giving us the money. As a topping on the cake, they didn't even believe I would actually be able to finish university because we all know she's not the brightest in our family. Okay then, COVID started and everyone was working from home. I got a girlfriend and a therapist who were both shocked at how calmly my mother and I accepted defeat. They told me that I needed to put them in their place, but I don't think they meant for me to do what I did. After I built myself a computer with some help from my father, he asked me to help build his own. It was a rare but welcome bonding experience. After his death, the computer was just standing there, losing its value, and my grandparents were dead set on selling it for the same amount my father bought it for. No amount of, "It's been 4 years since he built it," would work on them. So I got a little plan brewing in my brain. Since my grandparents knew I was working from home, I called them and asked to borrow my dad's PC because mine was broken. Only for 2 weeks until I received a paycheck and had enough money to repair mine. We had a lot of back and forth. They really didn't want to give it to me, but I had an argument for everything they said, so they agreed in the end. Just because I put too much trust in people who don't deserve it, I asked her once again if there was any way she could give me the money my father left me. My grandmother said we had already been through this conversation, and besides, I didn't need this money now because I had a paying job. Okay, that was your last chance. I went over to get the PC, and my mom waited for me in her car. She met my uncle, my father's brother, and they had a little chat. He said, we had a computer at our house and had to put it in the basement because the damn thing was taking up too much space. Our kid does her homework on a tablet now." Before I left, my granddad tried to have a word with my grandma to give me the PC and not ask for it back because they did not need it. She shut him down. I came down with the PC, we left. I immediately blocked my granny's number. My mom was not so cold-hearted, so she decided to keep in contact. 2 weeks passed, and Grandma called my mother to ask about the computer. My mom came up with a lie, basically saying there was no repairing my computer, and if I gave their computer back, I wouldn't be able to work. My grandma responded with, "Oh, that's bad. I'm sure you will figure something out, but we need the computer for our granddaughter to do school projects on it." My mom responded, "What about that computer they have in the basement and don't use because it takes up too much space? I'm sure you will figure something out." She blocked my grandmother after this and told me that if there's something I want to tell her, I can. My hands were completely untied and my mom was done trying to find a compromise with those people. Before that, my mom was trying to make me rethink my decision of not giving the computer back. I called my grandmother and she responded with the voice of an absolutely tortured soul, "Oh, how could you do it, Wawa?" I told her that I learned to act like this from her. We had a huge argument and all her points were based on criticizing my mother. How it was all her idea, that my mother made me hate them, that she never loved my dad. It was heartbreaking to hear considering my whole life, my mom was the one who asked me not to cut the family out of my life because they are a family, even if a crappy one. So I told her that my mom had been nothing but ever accepting of their crappy antics, and if not for her, the situation would look way worse. They failed to connect with me when my father was alive. They never reached out after his death, and they disregarded the fact that not only did their son die, but it was also my father. It was my mom's ex-husband. We were all grieving. She could hear that I wasn't sorry for her in any way. She treated my father horribly, so I was blaming her in some way too, but I never put that in words. So she tried one last thing she could come up with. "What about the other granddaughter? She needs the computer for her school. If you hate me so much, at least think of her. She loves you." I said, "The one who has both of her parents alive and well, the one who had a computer but it was so useless to her they put it in the basement. I think she and her living dad can figure it out just fine." There was a pause, and she goes, "Did your mother tell you to say this to me?" Once again shifting the blame onto my mom. I had heard it enough times in my life, so I just said, "Okay, I will say something my mother has never told me to say to you. Go duck yourself and tell my granddad I don't hold any grudges against him. You are the only one at fault." I dropped the call and blocked her number. The end. The next one is a malicious compliance story. I, F28, Dislike cooking. Don't get me wrong, I cook for survival, but it is not something I like or enjoy. At my in-laws, both my Emil and Ciel are stay-at-home partners and love to cook. Neither of their husbands lifts a finger to help, and they like it that way. Before marriage, I was treated as a guest. But since my marriage 6 months ago, they expect, want, and demand I cook with them. The first few times I went along with it, but I hated it. It took 5-7 hours to make food and do dishes. So when they planned to get together last weekend and discuss the menu, I suggested ordering in. This way everyone can be more relaxed. They looked like I insulted them. I told them they can cook, but to give me a list of what I should make, I will buy it. They said that's not how traditions work, and if I hate it so much I can relax with the men. That's exactly what I did, much to their anger. I helped set the table and served, but that was it. As we were eating, my husband commented on how good something tasted. Mill immediately went on about how I wouldn't be cooking anything for him. When he said he can cook for himself, Seal chimed in with how her husband or dad never had to cook a day in their life, and how marrying lazy women like me has ruined his manhood. I looked at my husband and we both left. Miel and Sil are blowing up our phones over my arrogance and calling him spineless. Even my mom is taking their side now. But guess who doesn't care? Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.